become much more apocalyptic than the intelligence briefing to the White House on climate change. In the past, George Bush has been one of the most outspoken opponents of agreements like the Kyoto Treaty. He was worried about the potential damage to American business. But in a confidential assessment by his intelligence services, seen by Newsnight, there's a clear message. If global warming continues as predicted, the damage to America and its future as a superpower will be much bigger. Here's Susan Watts with this exclusive report. Over the last few months, the intelligence agencies of a growing list of countries, from Germany, Norway and the UK in Europe to Australia, have been quietly weighing up the future in a warming world. Now America is putting the finishing touches to its intelligence assessment. I understand it looks out to the year 2030 at 40 nations where the effects of climate change might have a knock-on effect for America. The significance of this is not in what it says, but who's saying it. The message is broadly similar to that coming from scientists. But the fact that the intelligence agencies in the States have taken ownership of this gives it fresh weight in US politics.
I think it's fundamentally important because as the world's only superpower, the security community obviously has far greater weight in the US than it does in other capitals in the world at a global level. And by making climate change a matter of fundamental national security, it puts it on a par with other issues such as economic security, energy security, food security, which are currently guiding US policy. Once we get that, we can see fundamental changes in the way the US interacts with the world on climate change.
The key message in the intelligence assessment is for the incoming president, that the international community now expects America to set meaningful long-term goals on cutting greenhouse gas emissions. And there's a warning too. If Washington is not seen as doing enough, it will damage its leadership reputation, giving other nations the upper hand.
This national intelligence assessment will help to mobilize the wheels of the U.S. government and its many agencies and regions around the world more resilient to climate change effects that are happening even today.
One of the most striking conclusions of the assessment is that Russia has the most to gain from climate change, followed by Canada, as the permafrost in the north thaws and both gain access to mineral resources and transport routes through the Arctic. Intelligence agencies see a future where the first world lies between 40 degrees north and the North Pole, and the second or less developed world would encompass everything beneath it. Incidentally, that includes Washington, D.C. The assessment foresees increasing regional tensions with countries weak for scarce water resources. Agricultural production will become increasingly challenging, particularly in developing countries. So the report says making America better able to cope at home and more prepared to reach out to international partners will become increasingly important.
We need more options. To get more options, we need to spend a lot more money now on science and technology. So just taking America, from the $5 billion a year it's spent today on energy research and development, it should increase that fivefold to 25 billion. That would be the war on terror scale of research and development. Or if we're really ambitious, we could increase it by 10 times to $50 billion US dollars a year. That's the size of the Apollo program. So we've done this before when we have a real aspiration in terms of Apollo or perception of a real national security threat in terms of the war on terror.
On terrorism, the report says some could argue the West has caused the climate change problem while foisting its burden onto others. But it judges this unlikely to increase terrorist activity. Washington can be in no doubt now as to the scale of the challenge ahead. All eyes will be on the new administration to see if it does more than just listen and act. Senior politicians in Washington have been debating security implications. One who addressed them was British former Foreign Secretary Margaret Beckett. My colleague Jeremy Paxman asked her for her assessment of these intelligence reports. Here's that interview from a little earlier this week. I think it's very significant for two reasons. One is because there are real security implications. It was in fact a group of retired American military people, generals and admirals and so on, a year ago now, who said that climate change was a threat multiplier, and indeed that's what it is. And they've taken that on board, and of course not only do they see security implications, but also it means they're taking the issue itself more seriously, as we would hope they would.
What does it say about Washington politics and politicians
anywhere in the world, it's security issues that put things more securely on the desks of leaders. And of course that's where we need it to be across the world. Last week, in fact, I was in Japan talking on exactly the same issue at a meeting attended by the Japanese Prime Minister, and for the same reason, because that's the thing that's putting it where it belongs, right at the top of leaders' agendas.
Yes, but it surely should have been at the top of the agenda anyway. We're talking about the imminent destruction of the planet.
Yes, but part of the problem, Jeremy, is that so few people fully realise that the word imminent or the word urgent is relevant. They're still thinking in terms of, will it harm our children? Will it harm our grandchildren? Well, actually, it's a problem for us today.
But we are talking about pretty apocalyptic security dangers, aren't we?
Well, everywhere and for all time. Water security, food security, competition for land, these have always been drivers of conflict. Not necessarily sole causes, but exacerbated the conflict. And so, of course, that means that all these issues surrounding climate change are, as I say, a threat multiplier, and they are something that will exacerbate problems, particularly, this is especially sad, particularly in regions of the world where there's already instability, is that so few people fully realise that the word imminent or the word urgent is relevant. They're still thinking in terms of, will it harm our children? Will it harm our grandchildren? Well, actually, it's a problem for us today.
But we are talking about pretty apocalyptic security dangers, aren't we?
Well, everywhere and for all time. Water security, food security, competition for land, these have always been drivers of conflict. Not necessarily sole causes, but exacerbated the conflict. And so, of course, that means that all these issues surrounding climate change are, as I say, a threat multiplier, and they are something that will exacerbate problems, particularly, this is especially sad, particularly in regions of the world where there's already instability, which very often are among those who are likely to be the hardest hit. So it will be a problem for the whole global community, and I'm relieved and encouraged to see that that is beginning to be grasped right across the world.
Margaret Beckett, thank you.
Thank you. That was the former British Foreign Secretary Margaret Beckett speaking to us